We are live with SCI TV. I am Joshua Gordon, the founder of the Sports Conflict Institute. Today we are joined by Dr. Ken Pendleton, my co-host. Ken, welcome.
Hi, Josh.
And we have a very special guest today. One of us is a world champion, and let me tell you, it's not Ken or I. Aaron Scheidies, World Triathlon Champion. Aaron, welcome.
How's it going? Thanks for having me on the SCI TV.
So, Aaron, we've gotten to know you a bit over the last year. You've talked to my class. You've come and actually stayed with me here in Eugene, Oregon. And what I'm hoping is you could start by letting people know a little bit about how you got involved in triathlon and how you got to the point where you have this world champion to your label now. And it hasn't always been an easy or smooth path. So we're going to poke you and prod you a little bit about that along the way here.
Okay, sounds good. How I got to where I am right now is basically right now I have a degenerative eye condition called juvenile macular degeneration, where I lose my central vision over time, and I started losing it when I was going into second grade. They started finding out that I wasn't seeing the chalkboard, I wasn't seeing books and able to read books well, and so I went on a 4-year journey basically of trying to figure out what was going on with my vision. But I was a young kid right then, and I was a good athlete. I was a really good soccer player, and I also always wanted to be a professional soccer player. And to be honest, my vision or lack thereof vision is actually what got me into triathlon, and it's been a blessing because I struggled for 2 to 3 years with depression, OCD, and eating disorder and stuff, trying to get over losing my vision in that spot in your teenage years where you're just trying to be normal and be like everybody else. And I questioned a lot in that time period and quote unquote hit rock bottom. Definitely had thoughts of what the point of living is and things like that. But all those things really just made me stronger. And in high school, going to high school, I finally got to the point that I just your vision gets worse and worse and worse, and you just can't see a fuzzy ball and other objects and players running around you and things. So I just got to the point where I really couldn't play soccer at an elite level anymore, even though I had this dream of being a professional soccer player. And my brother asked me if I wanted to go into swimming, and that's kind of how everything started. Going to high school, I went into swimming, and I really got this. Just being in the water gave me this kind of freedom from all the pressures of society and all the feeling like I had to prove something. And at that beginning part of swimming and everything like that, my motivation, because I was still kind of getting through my grievance or acceptance of losing my vision, to be honest, I was motivated through anger at that time. I was motivated through anger of having this condition and whatnot. But then as I continued in swimming, and then I started cross country and track in high school, I kind of started slowly understanding that this was just normal for me. Having this vision, was normal for me, and I started really trying to seek out new challenges. And I no longer was competing and participating through and motivated by anger, but I was more motivated by kind of really trying to seek out new challenges. And that's where I tell everybody that's where I started learning to really be resilient and learn how to overcome any obstacle in my way. And those are really the things that I learned over the years that have gotten me to where I've gotten in the sport of triathlon. From the swimming, cross country, and track and field, like I said, I looked out for new challenges, and I found out there was a triathlon around my area in Michigan, and told my parents I wanted to do it. And I was legally blind then, but I told them I wanted to do it, and they drove me out to the race site. And I basically, and the night before, they drove the bike course and drove the run course, and I just memorized everything, memorized potholes, and basically just stayed on the white line for the race, and tried to use other people as to navigate the course, as well as my memory of where to turn by memorization. And then in the swim, I just followed splashes and everything. And so I rode a single bike. I did it on my own for the first couple years of triathlon. but it wasn't safe. But that's, I think, another thing is, in order to get to the top and be the best you can be, you got to take a lot of risks. And so, but this was back when I was probably one of the only blind vision impaired people in the sport of triathlon, so no one really knew how to accommodate a blind vision impaired athlete or what they needed or anything like that. But I really fell in love with the sport of triathlon and just found out that I could go to the World Championships, and my vision got worse, continued to get worse as it continues to now because it's degenerative. And in 2002, I went to my first World Championships, and the competition level wasn't anything kind of to what it is today, but won my first World Championship then in 2002 and continued in the sport. And like I said, I just wanted to keep continuing to challenge myself, and so I went up in the kind of the levels of all the way and did an Ironman in 2005, and then found out the sport of triathlon could be a Paralympic or would be a Paralympic sport in 2016, and so I set my sights on that because I always wanted to be go to the Paralympics and win a gold medal. And so just through perseverance of that and trying to seek out new challenges and all that, it's been a long road, but since 1999, 2000, when I started my triathlon career, it's been a really good opportunity. I've learned a lot, and I've become a lot stronger person, but I've been blessed with a lot of opportunities because of it.
Wow, I mean, it's what I hear there is, you've been incredibly risk taking and resourceful and persistent. What were some, besides the obvious obstacle that most people would have in their mind of being visually impaired and doing that? What were some of the obstacles? What was the attitude of the people that you competed against? Coaches, your family, physical, etc.
Well, there's a lot of things that occurred. One of them was just the perception of the other people, spectators, the other athletes, and things like that that I had to deal with, and that's kind of a psychosocial thing that I just deal with, to be honest, on a day-to-day basis of when I come in contact with somebody else, what is their initial perception of me? Is everybody looking at me? Am I the main object of attention? Am I an outcast? And so, initially, and now I raced with a guide starting in 2003, so people had never seen a blind vision impaired athlete, to be honest, in a triathlon, so they had no idea what was going on. Two people tied together, and especially on the run, I've heard everything in the books that you could hear, like way to use the buddy system, way to work together, look, it's two convicts, hey, that's not fair, there's a tandem division. I've heard every single comment, little thing, and that's less and less now today with more and more people involved in the sport. But I got a lot of, like I said, that's not fair, or that's cheating, or those are the things that you got to deal with. And it's very, especially when you're competing at an elite level, because the other aspect of it, and the obstacles that I faced, was that I'm not only just competing or participating. I'm trying to compete, and when I go to a race, I don't compare myself to, well, how am I doing against the other blind athletes, or how am I doing against the other amputee athletes? I'm competing. I'm thinking, how I do against the elite athletes? How am I doing against the guys that are winning this? Because that's who I compare myself against. So, when you're coming into, when you're looking at it that way, and you go about it that way, and you're trying to put yourself at the top of the results. And when you do really good in races, and let's say you get on the podium, or you should get on the podium, or because you do really good at one race, it qualifies you for something else, that's when I came to the obstacles, because of course everybody will say, oh, well, he rode a tandem, that's not fair. There's many times when I got taken off the results. I might have won the race overall, but I got taken off the results because there's this quote-unquote, it's not fair, I must have an advantage. And so those are the barriers, and that's another thing that I wanted to really do, was break down those barriers for people in regular society to realize that somebody with a disability can compete at the elite level. And as I really became more comfortable with being blind and being okay with whatever people say and not really care, I tried to become more of a leader and step up and make sure that that my voice was heard, to let people know that, you know, just because someone competes at a high level that they're an athlete with disability doesn't mean that, well, they have some sort of advantage or whatever. You know, they could, many times they're better or as good or better than the elite of the elite on the able-bodied level. And so, you know, sometimes you have to confront people, and I've had many opposition in my career in sport, but I think because I haven't been willing just to let people kind of just tell me what to do and always just do what I'm told, and sometimes you got to confront those naysayers and educate them on the truth.
Now, Aaron, you talk about educating. Ken and I have taught your story at the University of Oregon in our college courses. One of the immediate questions that comes up are just some of the nitty-gritty about what does it mean to compete in running, what does it mean to compete on the bike and swimming as a visually impaired athlete. Can you give us a little bit of that nitty-gritty and also educate folks a little bit on what it means for power output and all of that, so that we can break down some of those myths that come along with it as well?
Well, I mean, first of all, you know, people that the regular society, let's say, they always hear, well, you compete with a guide, so I guess there's a belief that if you race with someone else, you must have an advantage, which, you know, without even looking at the details and the rules, they just automatically start thinking that, when in fact, so for example, I swim with the guide. I swim tethered next to my guide. My guide must swim next to me. My guide can't swim ahead of me. I can't draft off my guide. He can't pull me. I must swim right next to him. There's no way I'm getting an advantage off of that. You know, everybody else in the whole race can draft off other swimmers anyways, but he can't go ahead of me at all. So there's no advantage. And if they want to say anything about advantages, well, the tether creates drag, so it actually is a disadvantage if you want to, you know, go to that details. That's the swim, and I'm doing everything by feel because I can't see the buoys or anything like that. I'm just going with what his the proprioceptive kind of input on the bungee cord tether. On where to go, and then the bike, we're riding a tandem bike. I mean, I'm not going to lie, there's points in the bike. If you have some courses, tandem bikes are course specific on what's going to be an advantage and not advantage. On a flat course or flat road, you're going to just straight ahead on a flat road. There's definitely an advantage of riding a tandem. And then if you're going uphill, I mean, gravity is an exponential factor where it's going against you exponentially. So uphills are actually harder on the tandem. And then really technical courses where maybe there's a lot of turnarounds and a lot of, you know, turns and things like that. The tandem, I mean, it's like, you know, a bus doesn't drive as fast as a sports car. It's kind of like that. But then in terms of power output, there's definitely situations that one person on the back is maybe less powerful than the person in the front, and maybe the person in the front is giving a little more advantage or whatever. Well, we're all competing against each other in terms of in the blind vision impaired category. We all are on tandems, but in my circumstance, I mean, I have something that tells my power. I know how much I can put out, and so I know that I can put out 340 watts for an hour of power. So and that's kind of what a lot of the professionals are doing. So I know I'm putting out as much or more than my guide. So there's no way that I'm getting an advantage from my guide. And the thing about a tandem too is, just because you're putting out a ton of power, let's say, or one person's putting out a ton of power and the other person's putting out less power, doesn't necessarily mean that power is contributing, going together to equal more speed, because you also have the fact that if one person's not in rhythm with the other person, then you're losing a lot of power going side to side, and because you're not very efficient and in sync. So the sport triathlon racing with a guide is really a team event. It becomes you have to work together, and we have to lean on the turns together and everything like that. And then on the run, you know, everybody says, well, the guide's pacing you, so you must have an advantage. Well, again, the guide has to run side by side with me, and from my knowledge of sport and track and field, a pacer runs in front of you, and so and every other athlete in the course. What's every other athlete in the course of a race doing? They're looking at their people ahead of them and trying to catch them. So everybody technically has a pacer. So I don't buy any of that stuff, and people can say what they want, but I've gotten to the point of kind of like, well, you know, you can. I'll educate them on that, but some people are very kind of hard-headed, and they just have in their head, well, you must have an advantage, so they're not even really listening to you. But that's kind of how I look at it now.
The extent to which this has sort of caused controversy was illustrated by the fact that you eventually had to file a lawsuit. Can you walk us through that and how it was resolved?
Yeah, and so there's this whole in sport in general, not just in disability sport or Paralympic sport, but in sport in general, there's this whole notion of we need to level the playing field for everyone, which you can't level an unlevel playing field. I mean, we all have genetic differences and things like that, and so we all have different abilities, make riskier decisions or less risky decisions, adapt better, differently, accommodate differently, and all that kind of stuff. So, but they decided that, well, since we have these blind, vision impaired individuals that are all legally blind, but they're competing against each other, we should, in order to quote-unquote level the playing field, we should make all the blind, vision impaired individuals, some of which are totally blind, some of which have some vision, we should just make them all blind and take away all their vision and put a blindfold over their eyes, and that will make it all fair. Well, here's the problem. The problem, this is what problem I have with, this is not just in sport, this is just in life. I have a problem with the people making the rules not having the condition for which, or not being in the situation to which they're making the rules for. So all the people that made that rule, none of them are blind, vision impaired. So from the outside looking at it, you might think, well, oh, okay, now they all can't see anything, so it must be fair. Well, it's not fair because, well, one, it's very, very dangerous. I'm a physical therapist, and you have 3 balance systems, your visual system being one of them. If you have any light perception at all, you're going to use that vision system for balance. So if you immediately put a blindfold over somebody that has some vision, you're going to throw their balance off, which is unsafe, and basically can give you vertigo. And I experienced this when I tried it out. Put these so-called blackout glasses on, and within a minute or two, I had a guide with me. I ran into a fence, I ran into a ditch, just staggered all over the place. So then you start getting into the ethical and stereotype and that kind of stuff of, well, you put these people that are not like me on the course, and they're staggering around and all that kind of stuff. All the spectators start watching that, and then they start getting the idea of, oh, these blind, vision impaired people, they're all over the place, they're unsafe, they can't even get around independently. And then we're back, we've basically put ourselves back 30, 40 years ago with the American Disability Act and all that kind of stuff. We've almost gone back in time of looking at people with disabilities, so, which is not the case. Blind, vision impaired people can get around independently, fully independently, but if you take them out of the way they live their life and put them in this total different realm, it's kind of like, let's say, Ken or Josh, you wake up tomorrow morning and you're completely blind. Well, of course you're going to be staggering all over the place. Feel helpless, because that's not how you live every day of your life. The completely blind people put on the blackout glasses, that's how they live every day of their life, completely blind. It's not like it changes anything. So they've adapted in every single aspect of their life how to deal like that. But if you take somebody that has some vision and you make them completely blind, then that's not how they live every single day of their life. So it's not making it equal. So it's actually kind of a negative. We've turned around the whole situation. So and those are just the types of things that and I feel very, very strongly about that. I felt very, very strongly about that, and about 99% of the people in the sport of triathlon on the blind vision impaired community were on my side and had my same viewpoint on things. But you know, it did take a lot for me. There was a lot of sacrifice with that whole legal lawsuit thing that I took a lot of flack from people that were uneducated about the situation, just heard about a legal lawsuit, and there was quite a bit of stuff on social media and this and that kind of stuff that people wrote, and you know, you got to really pick and choose your battles, and which ones you're gonna fight and which ones you're gonna kind of be like, okay, this one's not really worth it. But when it comes to what's ethical, what's safe, and where you're going in the future, sometimes you got to stand up for your class and your people, and no matter what you have to sacrifice, in the end, it's worth it.
So can you take us through a little bit? Obviously, your first step wasn't the lawsuit, but there were some intermediary steps. Can you tell us a little bit about what that process was, and you know, obviously the challenge of competing during this time and trying to also, you know, deal with this really challenging situation? You know, tell us a little bit about that.
Well, they came out with this. They came out with this rule, and out of the blue, no one had any say in it, of course, except the people that had full vision that were making rules for totally blind people. And of course, the whole blind vision impaired community was stunned, and so we first tried to write letters to them. We tried to speak to them in person. Initially was told from International Triathlon Union, we don't want to talk to you. To me, I got a personal email saying, you know, we're not going to talk to individual athletes. And then so what we did was, the blind vision impaired community, we protested. We took 30 blind athletes to the national championship, and everybody just protested and didn't wear the blacker glasses. And I raced in the national championship wave, knowing that I had to wear the blacker glasses, but I swam, biked all out, and got into the lead. So I was well out in front of everyone, and then just walked the run in protest. And so, and you know, it takes something like that. So we basically had the whole blind vision impaired community in the U.S., every single triathlete that's blind vision impaired, protesting against these blacker glasses, and it was there was, you know, New York Times article and things like that about that, and but we tried to speak with the governing bodies many times, had many emails of saying why all the different aspects of why it's unfair, the medical aspect of being unsafe, because they always preach and kind of stuff like safety and everything. And what I didn't understand this whole situation is, they don't allow us to wear headphones because that's technically making yourself deaf, but and they say it's a safety issue. Well, I guess it's okay to make yourself blind, and it's not a safety issue. I didn't understand that. So we tried every single aspect. We tried everything. And the last two straws on that were the last two straws, after 2 years of trying to get them to understand this was not the right way to, so, you know, quote unquote, level the playing field, was to go to the social media, or the media, and then that didn't do anything. So then the only other way was to go to legal action.
It's hard, you know, as a person who's legally blind, I can't help but sort of reflect on a couple things you've said. The first is, there is no such thing as a level playing field. Just, you know, think of the obvious example of basketball players, right? You know, we know that if you're a white male between the ages of 20 and 30, you have about a 1 in 6 chance of having an NBA career. You know, that's a that's a hell of an inborn advantage, right? You know, no one would say, let's find a way to level the playing field against the Shaquille O'Neals of the world.
Yeah.
But the second thing is, drawing from a personal experience, there was a time when we went to they invited in South Florida, they invited the blind community to go see The King and I with Yul Brynner. Would have been quite an honor, except that they had us all sit in the back away from the stage, and it occurred to me after that what they were thinking about was the idea that it didn't, why put us in the front row because we can't see anyway. And so what I really got out of that is they basically conflate being partially sighted with having no sight at all. They think that difference is so small that it makes very little difference. So when they're telling you, well, wear these blackout glasses, there's two things that strike me about this. Pursuant to your first quote about, there is no level playing field, they never said, hey, let's have all the competitors wear blackout glasses and let's just see who's really the best triathlete, among everybody, period. There was like, rather getting to the second part, like the example with the King and I, what they were saying is, well, we can't see how it makes much difference to someone who's partially sighted because they only have partial sight. And so they thought I think they actually probably thought they weren't handicapping you very much.
Yeah, there's two parts to that, which I've had to really, I've learned how that I have a major educational role in being in the spot I am in triathlon and the spot I am in disability sport, and two things on that rule. The equivalent of that rule to, let's say, the other disability categories is, and they didn't really understand this, is, well, okay, so you have other amputees and they're cut off at their limbs different levels. I mean, so do we cut, one guy is cut really close to his knee and one guy is, basically has an amputation up at his hip. So basically the equivalent to that would be, we need to cut all their other people so they're all equal. We're going to cut their legs off the rest of the way. That's the equivalent, to be honest. But they wouldn't do that because of course it's, cutting somebody's leg off, which, but and then the other aspect of this, and this is where what you talk about, and I found all the time, is people hear the word blind, they irrelevant of hearing legally blind or any other, way of saying it, they hear the word blind, they automatically think lights out, no sight at all, when in reality 90% of the people that are legally blind have some vision. You see a guy with a cane walking down the sidewalk and everybody immediately thinks, well, that guy has no vision at all, he can't see anything. Well, there's a 90% chance that person has some light perception, and there's only 10% of the individuals that are legally blind that are actually totally blind. But there's this, and that's why when I talk to people, I always say blind and vision impaired, to kind of, okay, the blind is the totally blind individuals, and the visually impaired is any individuals that's legally blind has some vision but still legally blind. So you put out a really big point, and that's the major educational part about people in educating our society, is that people hear the word blind and they automatically think lights out blind, where they don't understand in everything in life there's a gradation. There's a gradient of being legally blind and having worse and worse and worse vision up to being totally blind.
So, Aaron, from your perspective, because you have been thrust into this role of advocate, what else needs to happen to make sport a more embracing experience for those who have disability or of any kind? And I know that, for example, you and I have had conversations where you do get those phone calls where someone's been excluded from a running camp or whatever. What else needs to happen out there?
I mean, I think there's two things. There's the part that the changes that need to happen to educate society, and then there's the parts that need to happen within the disability community, because within the disability community, it might even be worse within the disability community, and when you get to an elite level of competition, that then everybody starts saying, well, this person has an advantage over me, that person has an advantage over me because this or that or whatever. I think you can only level the playing field to a point of so far when it comes to an elite level competition where you're talking the Paralympics, the World Championships. You can only make it fair, per se, to a certain point, and after that, when you start thinking about, well, this person can train easier, this person can see shady courses versus non-shady courses, and all these little aspects, then you start actually punishing the people that have a condition that are really good at accommodating and adapting. I know people that are totally blind that are 1,000 times better at getting around and have adapted and accommodated, and to the naked eye, or to the public's eye, don't look like they're blind or vision impaired. Whereas you take somebody that's just at the legal blindness level, and they live a different lifestyle, they don't accommodate, they don't adapt as well, and they look very impaired. So I think there's multiple things. You have to have people in the roles of making decisions that have the condition. That's one part of it. And then the blind vision impaired community, or the amputees, or whatever the other the category is, you have to realize that, you know what, you can't. The people that are best athletes, the people that are the most talented, are probably going to win. I mean, or that's what we want, at least. But when you start trying to level or kind of separate every single little aspect that could go into play, your plan's gonna backfire. And then the other part, the whole society thing, society needs to be educated and needs to come to the acceptance that somebody that's visually impaired, or somebody that has a disability, can compete at or above the elite level of able-bodied athletes, and they can do it without having some sort of advantage, or it always comes up and people think, well, they must have an advantage, or this is why the reason why they're better is not because they're a better athlete, but because they must have some sort of like people think on the tandem bike, or they might have some sort of prosthetic that makes them more powerful, or something, and so there has to be an acceptance of that. And to be honest, I mean, I think more if we can get more coverage of the Paralympics, I mean, people in normal society will see that the competition level of the Paralympics, it's very, very close to the competition level of the Olympics. I mean, you look in my category for track and field of the 5,000 meters on the track, and the standards are in the 13 minutes. So I mean, that's pretty close to the Olympic level for a lot of individuals, a lot of countries. And then you have stories like, let's say, Oscar Pistorius. Let's only talk about his athletic endeavors and his abilities, and he's competing in the Olympics with the total people that have both legs and everything like that. So, but there's always that group of people that say, oh, well, he must have an advantage because he has these prosthetic legs. It's always that, and that's the thing that needs to be changed. Is people need to be educated, and then when you're talking about within the categories of disability, there has to be people that are making decisions that are actually living in that situation.
And so in some ways, Aaron, education is pretty simple, which is go for a run with you. I had the pleasure of going for a run with you, and anyone who questions your talent just has to try and keep up. It's pretty clear, and also very awakening in terms of what the environment is around you and how the environment can be made better to help more folks access the trails and everything else we have out there as well.
Yeah, and that's all I can do. I can only explain to people what I see, explain what I need, and then they can maybe be around me or somebody like in my situation and see how we get around and see how we live, and then from there they can make their own judgments, opinions, and whatever. And I can't get into somebody's head and change what they think, but I can only educate them on what I do and how I do it.
And Aaron, as we wrap the show, any final thoughts for folks, and then also ways for people to follow you? I know that anyone who watches this is going to become someone who wants to follow your progress as you continue to compete, and so help them be able to follow all the great progress in your blog and all of that as well.
I mean, people can always follow me on Twitter at Aaron Scheidies, or Facebook, and or also keep up with my website and my blog. C Different with Aaron, the letter C different with Aaron.com is my website. And really, right now I'm on my road to Rio. Unfortunately, my category of triathlon got dropped out of the Paralympics, which is a long story too. But I'm on this mission and road to go to the Paralympics, and so I'm looking into to running and cycling, and so people can really follow that road, my road to Rio, on my blog and on my website. And then also I always encourage people to check out the apparel that I create, because I have iChart shirts and things like that, and I always encourage people to get one for themselves and get one for a friend, so that when they wear it, other people in society, it's quote-unquote eye-catching if you're wearing an eye chart around. People start asking questions, and the first way to educate people is through them questioning and getting, being explained the situation, and from there, that's the first part of educating society.
Well, Aaron, thank you so much for joining the show. You're a constant inspiration, and I really appreciate the friendship as well. And I will second the idea of the shirt. My wife has one of those shirts, and they're quite good looking. So I like when she wears it, so others should be out there as well with it.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
All right, thank you.